The morning sun filtered through the gauzy curtains in soft streaks, casting golden light across my bedroom floor. I stood in front of the mirror, barefoot, my palm resting gently over the smallest swell of my belly. 12 weeks, barely a bump yet, but to me, it felt like I was holding the world. After years of dashed hopes, whispered prayers, and the silence of empty sonograms, this moment was nothing short of a miracle. A quiet tear slid down my cheek as I whispered to myself, "Today's the day." I had rehearsed it all night. The words, the tone, how I'd sit across from my boss, Carl Hastings, and deliver the news with calm professionalism, not the bubbling joy that was threatening to spill out of me. I wasn't just pregnant, I was alive again. The kitchen smelled of toasted sourdough and freshly brewed coffee. My husband, Tyler, was humming a tune off-key as he buttered his toast. He looked up when I walked in and instantly noticed the look on my face. "You're glowing," he said with a crooked grin, walking over and pressing a gentle kiss on my forehead. "I'm terrified," I confessed, wrapping my arms around him. He held me tighter. "You faced down worse than Carl Hastings. You've got this." Tyler wasn't wrong. Carl was a shark in a tailored suit. The CEO of Rexford and Company for nearly a decade, he'd made it his mission to turn the company into a lean, profit-churning machine. And in doing so, he'd also turned it into a place where emotions were unwelcome, and anything deemed personal was seen as weakness. But I wasn't weak. I'd started at Rexford 7 years ago, a nervous 20-something assistant who barely knew how to organize an executive calendar. I worked late. I volunteered for the worst projects. I skipped holidays and clawed my way up the corporate ladder. Eventually, I became the director of operations, Carl's right hand. I knew the business better than he did in some areas. He relied on me more than he'd admit. I was in charge of organizing global shipments, managing logistics contracts, overseeing tech integrations. I'd never missed a deadline. As I pulled into the underground parking lot, my hands trembled on the steering wheel. I sat in the car for a minute, breathing deeply. "You are not just an employee," I told myself aloud. "You are the engine that runs this place." The elevator ride to the top floor felt unusually long. I clutched the folder I'd prepared with transition plans for the next few months. I was ready. Everything had been thought out. Alex could cover the European expansion trips. I could manage remote operations with the Asia-Pacific team. I even mapped out performance indicators for Q2 and Q3. I knocked on Carl's office door with practiced confidence. His voice boomed from inside, impatient as ever. "If it's not urgent, reschedule." "It is," I replied, already turning the handle. He didn't look up at first. He was typing rapidly, eyes glued to his dual monitors. His office was as cold and sterile as he was. Sleek furniture, black leather, a massive mahogany desk with nothing personal on it except an expensive glass sculpture that looked like it cost more than my car. "Make it quick, Jenna," he said without glancing at me. I stepped forward, heart pounding. "I have something important to share." He finally looked up, his expression unreadable, eyes sharp. "Let's hear it." I smiled softly, already anticipating his stoic reaction. "I'm pregnant." Silence. A beat too long. His jaw didn't move. His fingers stilled on the keyboard. "Congratulations," he said flatly, leaning back in his chair. "I assume you're aware that we're 6 weeks from launching our new international expansion?" "Yes," I replied, already opening my folder. "I've drafted a complete strategy for coverage. Alex is prepared to travel, and I'll continue managing key accounts and digital ops remotely. There won't be any disruption in workflow." He didn't take the folder. He just stared at me. "We need presence," he said slowly. "Commitment. This role doesn't function on half attention." "I'm not asking for special treatment," I said carefully. "I'm still fully committed. I'm offering a structured, temporary transition plan." Carl's eyes narrowed. "Jenna, I respect your work, but we don't have room for uncertainty in leadership, especially not now." I blinked, unsure what he meant. He stood abruptly. "I'm sorry, this isn't going to work." My stomach dropped. "Excuse me?" "You're terminated," he said bluntly, walking over to the credenza. "Effective immediately. HR will finalize your exit package." "You're firing me?" My voice cracked. He turned toward me, arms folded. "You made a personal choice that affects your availability. I need someone who can give 110%, not someone who's distracted." My blood went cold. "You're firing me because I'm pregnant," I said flatly. "No," he said quickly, "because your situation compromises the role." I took a step forward. "After everything I've given this company, the years of overtime, missed holidays, fixing your mistakes at midnight, you've been compensated for your work." "Carl, this is illegal." He didn't flinch. "Take it up with HR." He turned his back to me and sat back at his desk like the conversation was over. Like I was over. I stood there for a few seconds, too stunned to move. Then I walked out, gripping my folder so hard my knuckles went white. By the time I reached the elevator, my eyes were stinging. By the time I reached the parking lot, I was trembling. By the time I sat in my car, my hands were fists. But as I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror, a different fire ignited behind my tears. Because what Carl didn't know, what no one knew, was that I wasn't just an employee. I was an owner. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to the contacts saved under emergency use only. It rang twice before a voice answered. "Jenna, you ready?" "Activate the clause," I said calmly. "Let's remind Carl Hastings exactly who he just fired." When I hung up the phone, my heart was no longer racing. It was hammering with purpose. I sat in the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel, no longer trembling with fear or sadness, but burning with a new kind of fire. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like Carl Hastings' employee. I felt like his equal. No, his superior. I scrolled through my files and opened the folder labeled Equity Clause, R&C Holdings. My name was there in black and white, beside a number that had once seemed like a dream. 15% equity, vested quietly through a partnership agreement inked 4 years ago when I'd saved Carl's neck from a botched merger. That deal? Carl never wanted the board to know just how close Rexford and Company had come to collapse. But I'd stayed up 72 hours straight, untangled legal red tape, and negotiated new terms with a foreign logistics chain that saved the company millions. Carl hadn't said thank you. He'd offered me a silent backroom deal, a 15% equity stake in a new holding company he'd formed as a contingency shell. His words, "You're the reason this company survived. This way, you're not just working here. You own a piece of it." I'd had a lawyer friend look over it. It was airtight. And buried in the back of the document was a golden sentence. "In the event that Jennifer Clark is terminated without documented cause, full controlling rights of the contingency holdings assets transfer to her custody for a minimum of 90 days. Contingency Holding Company wasn't just a shell anymore. It had grown, morphed, merged, and eventually became the silent owner of Rexford's 3 most valuable subsidiaries. Carl may have forgotten that. I hadn't. Tyler was waiting for me when I got home. The moment I walked in, he saw it in my eyes. "He did it, didn't he?" I nodded. "Fired me. Said I was a liability. Said the company needed someone not distracted." Tyler clenched his jaw, pacing in the living room. "After everything, that man owes you everything." "Exactly," I said, collapsing onto the couch. "But he just made the worst mistake of his life." I filled him in on the call, on the clause, on the holding company Carl thought I'd forgotten about. "You're not just getting revenge," Tyler said carefully. "You're taking back what's yours." "I'm not going to scream or cry," I said. "I'm going to shake the foundation of that company until Carl realizes he never should have underestimated me." That evening, I reached out to Serena Alvarez, one of the most feared corporate attorneys in the state. We'd met at a women's leadership conference, and I'd helped her daughter get an internship at Rexford 2 years ago. "Jenna," Serena said when she picked up, "tell me you're cashing that clause in, because I've been waiting to eat a CEO alive for breakfast." "You're hired," I replied. I want it public. I want it loud. But most of all, I want it legal. She chuckled darkly. Say no more. I'll file the petition to transfer controlling rights tomorrow. But I suggest you prep your press release. Let's make this burn bright. The next day, I dressed with intention. A sleek navy suit, subtle heels, and a red lipstick that felt like war paint. I wasn't going back to Rexford to beg. I was going to reclaim. At precisely 9:45 a.m., Carl sat in his glass office, sipping coffee and barking orders on a conference call. He didn't notice the shift in energy that swept through the building until his executive assistant tapped on the glass and whispered something in his ear. He looked up, saw me standing there beside Serena, and froze. Miss Clark is here to execute a legal claim, Serena announced firmly. Per the equity clause in the R&C Holding Charter, dated 4 years ago, you'll find a hard copy and digital copy already in your inbox. Carl's face turned white. This is absurd. Serena smiled. What's absurd is terminating a partner without cause and expecting to walk away clean. Carl stood, trying to puff himself up. You're not a partner. You were an employee. And you're pregnant, for God's sake. This is a corporate setting. Exactly, I cut in. Not a maternity ward, so let's talk business. He blinked, unsteady. You wouldn't dare dismantle this company. You don't even know. Oh, I know everything, I said calmly. I know you used shell structures to hide losses last fiscal year. I know you've diverted board funds to silence 2 wrongful termination suits, and I know that R&C Holdings owns majority interest in the subsidiaries that actually generate Rexford's profits. Serena placed a folder on his desk. And now, per your own signed contract, Jenna controls those assets for 90 days. Carl collapsed into his chair, shoulders sinking. You'll tank everything. No, I said. I'll salvage what matters. I just won't be doing it with you. Behind me, the conference room had gone silent. Word had spread. Executives were peeking out from behind frosted glass panels. Whispers buzzed in corners. For once, Carl was the one cornered. As I turned to leave, I looked back over my shoulder. Next time you fire someone, I said, make sure they don't own the ground you're standing on. Tyler was waiting outside in the car when I stepped out. I climbed in, and for the first time in weeks, I smiled. A real smile. That felt good, I whispered. Tyler reached over and took my hand. You're not just winning, you're rewriting the rules. As we pulled away, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw Carl standing in the lobby, watching me leave, looking like a man who just realized the empire he built stood on foundations he didn't understand. He fired me for being pregnant. But he forgot. I wasn't just an employee. I was the future. I didn't expect the media storm to hit that fast. Within 48 hours, I was flooded with calls. First, it was local reporters sniffing around the legal filings, curious about the mystery woman who'd taken over a chunk of Rexford and Company practically overnight. Then came the national outlets, the business channels, women in leadership podcasts, legal blogs. They all wanted to talk to me. Not about scandal, about power. Serena's team had timed it perfectly. The day after the petition was filed, they leaked a copy of the original clause, redacted for privacy, but unmistakably bold in its language. A single sentence from the document went viral on LinkedIn. In the event of termination without cause, Jennifer Clark shall assume controlling interest in all assets under R&C Holdings for a minimum of 90 days. That clause wasn't just a legal footnote. It became a symbol, a weapon, a beacon for every woman who had been sidelined, talked down to, or quietly replaced once she started showing. The headlines followed fast. Pregnant executive turns the tables on CEO. She was fired, then took control of the company. The clause that changed everything. I did a sit-down interview with Forbes women, dressed in a soft green blouse that showed just a hint of my baby bump. I wasn't hiding it anymore. In fact, I leaned into it. The interviewer, a sharp-eyed woman named Naomi Tran, cut right to the chase. Jennifer, she said, you didn't just get fired. You flipped the power dynamic. How did you stay so composed? I smiled. I didn't always feel composed. But when someone tries to erase you just because you're pregnant, you remember every moment they underestimated you. And then you use it. And what do you say to critics who argue you're leveraging legal fine print to seek revenge? I looked directly at the camera. It's not revenge. It's justice. I wasn't just an employee. I was a builder, a strategist, a partner. And he tried to erase me because he saw me as less than once I decided to become a mother. The comments section exploded with support. This woman is a force! Every working mom needs to see this. She didn't burn the bridge. She bought the whole road. That weekend, Tyler and I took a walk through the park. My body was already changing. I felt heavier, slower. But my mind had never been sharper. We passed a group of young women on a picnic blanket, and one of them whispered, "Oh my God, that's her! That's the lady who—" She didn't finish, but I smiled anyway. Feels weird, I told Tyler, to be recognized for a clause in a contract most people never would have noticed. You've always noticed things others didn't, he said. It's why you got here, and it's why you're going further. The next week brought challenges. Carl wasn't going down without a fight. His lawyers filed a motion claiming I had misrepresented my stake and acted in bad faith. But Serena shut that down swiftly, citing every email, memo, and voice recording from the day the agreement was signed. Carl had used his own company email to confirm the arrangement. A rookie mistake from a seasoned CEO. Still, he managed to turn a few board members against me, spreading the narrative that I was unstable, emotional, and seeking attention. That's when I decided it was time to show just how stable, strategic, and focused I really was. I called for a meeting. Not just any meeting. A stakeholders summit with every division leader from the 3 subsidiaries under R&C Holdings. I walked into the glass-walled conference room wearing a soft cream pantsuit, minimal jewelry, and a quiet but confident smile. Some of them looked skeptical, others nervous, a few excited. But they were all curious. Let's be clear, I began, standing at the head of the table. I'm not here to burn this place down. I'm here to remind you why it exists and who helped build it. I clicked the remote and a slideshow came up. Growth charts, profit margins, acquisition reports. Every chart began with one common label at the bottom left. Initiated by J. Clark. You've been thriving, I continued, because of the decisions we made together, because of the late nights, the calculated risks, the hard conversations, and I'm here to ensure you continue thriving. One man raised his hand. Jeremy Tran, Director of Logistics. Are you planning to stay permanently, or is this just a show of force? I smiled. It's not about me staying. It's about what we fix while I'm here. I laid out a new plan. Maternity-friendly policies, equal pay audits, transparent promotion tracks, and a dedicated HR liaison team for whistleblower protection, something Carl had ignored for years. By the end of the meeting, 3 of the department heads stood and shook my hand. By the next morning, word had reached Carl. His old guard was cracking. He called me that afternoon. The call went straight to voicemail, but his voice was venom-sweet. Jenna, I think we both know this has gone far enough. Let's talk. Over coffee, maybe. Put the knives away. I didn't call him back. I didn't need coffee. I had control. And not just legally, morally, culturally, symbolically. I was now being asked to speak at the National Women in Business Forum. Harvard Business Review reached out to co-author a feature article on executive equity protections. And more than a dozen women inside Rexford sent anonymous notes thanking me for changing the game. One wrote, "I'm not scared to get pregnant anymore. You made that possible." Still, it wasn't easy. I was exhausted. My ankles were swollen. I cried at commercials. Tyler bought me a body pillow the size of a grizzly bear, and I used it like armor. But every morning, I woke up knowing my daughter, yes, we'd found out it was a girl, would grow up knowing her mother didn't take injustice lying down. She'd grow up knowing her mother rewrote the rules. The day of the hearing arrived like thunder. Outside the courthouse, a group of reporters clustered behind barriers, microphones and cameras aimed at the entrance. Serena and I emerged from the black town car, both of us in sleek navy suits. Mine was tailored around my 7-month bump, a small detail that made a big statement. No one could ignore it now. I was here, and visibly pregnant. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with tension. Carl sat with his new legal team, stiff suits, thin ties, and practiced smirks. He wore a charcoal gray suit, his hair perfect, his expression calm. But I knew that look. It was the same face he wore in the boardroom when he was bluffing before a deal fell apart. The judge, a sharp-eyed woman named Honorable Olivia Mendez, called the session to order. This hearing will determine the legitimacy of the employment termination, the contract clause in question, and any related claims of wrongful dismissal and discrimination. Carl's attorney, a man named Richards, rose to speak. Your Honor, my client, Mr. Carl Rexford, terminated Ms. Clark based on organizational restructuring, not personal or discriminatory grounds. The clause in question is outdated, loosely written, and intended for a different context. My client maintains full legal control of Rexford and Company. Then Serena stood. Your Honor, may I direct the court to Exhibit A, an email chain dated 12 months prior to the termination, in which Mr. Rexford explicitly acknowledges Ms. Clark's strategic partner status and approves the addition of the clause to her contract. In his own words, quote, "Should anything happen, Jen should be the one holding the reins." Carl flinched slightly. The court clerk handed copies of the printed emails to Judge Mendez. And, Serena continued, we have internal communications between Mr. Rexford and HR, in which he refers to Ms. Clark as a high liability due to her pregnancy and instructs them to find a loophole for dismissal. There was a hush, then murmurs. Carl's lawyer objected, but the judge overruled. Objection noted, but the evidence is admissible. Carl's expression changed. His smooth facade cracked. Then it was my turn. I took the stand. My voice was steady, even though my palms were damp against the wood. I didn't plan to fight this hard, I began. I loved my job. I loved what we were building. But the day I told my boss I was expecting, everything changed. Meetings disappeared from my calendar. My name was removed from key projects. 2 weeks later, I was escorted out of the building I helped build. I paused, letting it sink in. But I wasn't just an employee. I was a co-architect of the entire strategy Rexford and Company ran on. I negotiated deals Carl didn't understand. I mentored 3 department heads now running billion-dollar portfolios. I wrote the clause Carl tried to forget. The judge studied me, her face unreadable. I looked out at the courtroom, not just at Carl, but at the reporters in the back, at the Rexford staff who had come to watch. Firing a pregnant woman isn't just immoral, it's illegal, and worse. He did it thinking I wouldn't fight back. Silence. Then Judge Mendez leaned forward. This court recognizes the clause as legally binding. Control of Rexford and Company will remain in Ms. Clark's hands for the 90-day period stated. Furthermore, the court finds probable cause for a civil lawsuit regarding wrongful termination and discrimination. Proceedings will move forward. The gavel hit. Carl looked like he'd been punched in the chest. Outside, microphones flew at me. Jennifer, what's your next move? Do you plan to stay at Rexford? Any advice for other women in your position? I paused, then answered clearly. My next move is raising my daughter in a world where women don't have to choose between motherhood and ambition. I don't know if I'll stay, but I'll never stop fighting for fairness. Not just for me, but for all of us. Tyler met me at the bottom of the courthouse steps. He wrapped me in his arms as the cameras flashed. You did it, he whispered. I nodded, tears catching in my lashes. Not all of it, but enough. 3 weeks after the courtroom decision, I walked back into Rexford and Company. Not as an employee, not as a victim, as the interim CEO. Carl was nowhere in sight. Following the ruling, the board suspended his authority pending further review, and shareholders launched their own internal audit. Once the golden boy of finance, Carl was now under scrutiny from regulatory agencies and public opinion alike. A full-scale investigation into systemic discrimination within the company had been launched, and I was now the one overseeing it. The office felt different. Gone were the tailored suits strutting down the hallway with inflated egos and clipped tones. Now, people looked at me with something new in their eyes. Not fear, not awe, respect. My first move? I dismantled the toxic culture piece by piece. No more boys' club lunches, no more wink-wink exclusions of working mothers. I created a task force for workplace equity. I expanded paid maternity and paternity leave. We held open forums for female employees to speak anonymously and share their stories. And I listened. Every word, every tremble. Then I started firing people. Not out of revenge, but accountability. Those who facilitated Carl's agenda were let go. New leaders rose, people like Lara from marketing, who had been overlooked for years, and even Marcus from legal, who had quietly objected to the original termination but was silenced. "Thank you," he told me quietly, the day I promoted him to general counsel, "for remembering what justice should feel like." Serena remained by my side. She didn't just represent me legally, she became my advisor, my sounding board, my mirror when I began to doubt myself. One day over coffee, she said, "You know, Jen, this is bigger than one company." She was right. So I launched the Clark Initiative, a nonprofit legal advocacy firm dedicated to defending women facing workplace discrimination, especially during pregnancy. We offered pro bono counsel, public advocacy campaigns, and even corporate partnership training programs. I wasn't just building a company anymore, I was building a movement. Tyler and I moved into a new home just outside the city. It had a large garden, a wraparound porch, and a nursery painted in soft yellows and greens. One night, as we sat under the stars, his hand resting gently over my belly, he whispered, "She'll be proud of you." "I hope so," I said. "I hope she never has to fight the way I did." "Or if she does," he added, "she'll know exactly how." That summer, I gave birth to a daughter. We named her Eleanor Grace, after my grandmother, who raised me to believe I could be both strong and kind. In the delivery room, between tears and laughter, I held her tiny fingers and whispered, "You changed everything, you know." Because she had. She was the reason I didn't stay silent, the reason I found my courage, sharpened my voice, and rewrote the story they tried to assign me. Months later, a package arrived at my doorstep. No note, no return address. Inside was a small leather-bound book. The title? Legacy: What We Leave Behind. Tucked inside the front cover was a court order, the final ruling. Carl had been officially removed from Rexford and Company, stripped of his executive status, and fined for unlawful dismissal and gender discrimination. I smiled, closed the book, and placed it on Eleanor's future shelf. She would read it someday, and when she did, she'd know. Her mother wasn't just an employee. She was the architect of her own revolution. If this story resonates with you, hit the like button and leave your story in the comment section. And of course, subscribe to my channel for more real, raw, and ridiculous stories.